You can't trust the media on Star Wars games. In this video, I will be explaining to you why that is and providing proof. We've actually not been able to trust them on Star Wars games for a while. However, the egregious events of the past few weeks has led me to have to make this video so I can raise awareness and provide specific callouts. I'm going to detail what has happened recently, as that's the catalyst for this video, though this is just a branch of a much deeper problem rooted in hate that we need to fight back against. This is going to be a long video, but I really hope you can watch until the end because it's very important and there is a lot to go through. You need all of the context. So, in case you aren't aware or have forgotten what has happened in the past few weeks, I'm going to catch you up to speed right now. Less than a week before Star Wars Outlaws released on Switch 2, there was a playable demo at PAX West. Various creators got a chance to go hands-on and check it out. One particular YouTube channel that played the demo made a video claiming that the frame rate is terrible. This video went on to spawn dozens upon dozens of articles, which I'll get into later on in the video. Now, at PAX West, Nintendo did not allow anyone to record footage to show online. This, of course, raised more concerns about the game's frame rate. And that's fair. Potentially they were hiding something. The only footage we had of Outlaws on Switch 2 at the time was directly from Ubisoft, and it did not look very good in those official videos. This was all pre-release footage. Also, there is an expectation that at trade shows such as PAX West, games that are played ahead of release are usually running an older build of the game. In some cases, several months old. I've been there, I've experienced it myself, this is a fairly well-known thing. Lots of optimization and an inevitable big day one patch could be missing. Games journalists who do this for their job go to events and check out games early, and yet they decided to remove this thought from their mind when reporting on Star Wars Outlaws for Switch 2. The reason why Nintendo or Ubisoft did not want people recording footage at PAX West then uploading it is fairly obvious. This was a pre-release version of the game missing a ton of optimization. If people recorded the footage and put it out online, it would have been detrimental to the success of the game on Switch 2. It was not representative of the final product that people received on launch day. Those of you that follow my reporting will know that I reported on multiple new builds of Star Wars Outlaws being submitted to the Nintendo eShop ahead of launch. The game file size changed multiple times in the run-up to launch, indicating Ubisoft were continuously putting out new builds behind the scenes. This suggests that they were working on the game right until the very last minute to completely optimize the game. I'm not saying this was direct confirmation, but if you just use your brain, this could be a thought that you could keep in mind when writing articles criticising Star Wars Outlaws' frame rate based on one person's opinion at a trade show using a pre-release version. As we know, Star Wars Outlaws launched on Switch 2 to resounding success. Players and critics alike have praised just how well optimised the game is on Switch 2. It features a solid and locked 30 frames per second along with ray tracing. Despite being on a low-powered handheld, it is an impressive technical achievement by the teams at Ubisoft. Unfortunately, the game's media jumped the gun and, just like the vultures they are, assaulted Star Wars Outlaws once again. They took the comments of a single person in a single YouTube video as gospel and didn't think of any possible reasoning for what was happening. All of these websites mass-reported Outlaws was shaping up to be a disaster on Switch 2, and from that person's account, yes, it was in the pre-release version. All of them wrote very similar articles feeding into the negativity around Outlaws as a game and Star Wars in general. This created a major PR disaster just days before the Outlaws Switch 2 release. It became a laughingstock for a second time in a year, all because the game's media feed on hate clicks and don't do any research. Pretty much every article I clicked on didn't mention the fact that it could be a pre-release version, and a day one update could come and remedy the frame rate. Meanwhile, other people that played the game said it actually wasn't that bad at all. And yet no one wanted to report on what other people were saying, just the one guy that said it was terrible. To make matters worse, some of those outlets that put out an article on the game's performance seemingly had a review code at the time and were playing the game, which was totally optimized already. As someone who received a pre-release code, the game had the day one update ahead of day one. It was already optimized. They allowed a writer to put out a very negative story whilst knowing it would be completely contradicted 48 hours or so later. Human beings gravitate to clicking on things that are negative and hateful, and not on more positive things. The clicks on a hate-fueled article outweigh those of a positive review. Plus, most people only read the headline. If you read 100 headlines saying that Star Wars Outlaws is unplayable on Switch 2, but only see a few headlines titled Star Wars Outlaws Switch 2 Review, naturally the human brain will go to the assumption that it's unplayable. And yet, it reviewed very, very well on Switch 2. Unlike the game's journalists, the YouTuber actually apologised for making that video and said they were wrong, deleted the video, and provided an updated video that discussed just how good Star Wars Outlaws was on Switch 2 at launch. It doesn't stop there. It actually gets even worse, if you can believe it. So a few days after Star Wars Outlaws came out on Switch 2, a so-called journalist at a website called The Gamer wrote an article titled Star Wars Outlaws looks unbelievably bad on Switch 2. Now, you can have the opinion that it doesn't look great on Switch 2. I mean, it obviously looks worse than the other consoles and PC. Except this guy wasn't having an opinion on the full final released version of the game. He put out an article based on what he saw at PAX West 3 days after Outlaws came out, all totally well and good on Switch 2. Yes, seriously, a senior editor at The Gamer really put out an article 3 days after everyone had the game in their hands, knowing just how it was. What on earth is this absolutely dreadful journalism? A bunch of people, thankfully, called this article out. Then they changed the headline to be less aggressive, but did not change any of the article. The same website also put out a review saying it's actually really, really good on Switch 2. How ridiculous. The standards are simply so low, and you have to wonder what on earth we're even reading when it comes to Star Wars games anymore. For those of you that have watched my videos before, you'll know that I usually get to play new Star Wars games early at preview events. Now imagine if I played the next Star Wars game at an event early, and it was terrible in terms of performance. However, it was all fixed upon release. Then I put out a video after release saying that it's unplayable without playing the released version of the game and purely basing my opinions of what I played in the preview event. That would absolutely be absurd. You wouldn't be able to trust me anymore because it just doesn't make sense to do that. And yet outlets like these will continue to exist without any ramifications. That's why I'm asking you to block accounts that routinely get things wrong on social media or in your Google newsfeed or anywhere else you get your news, because the less of them you see, the better. They haven't just been doing it recently to Star Wars Outlaws either. They've been doing it since before the game even came out. It's not just websites. There are other egregious examples coming from both websites and large social media accounts that millions of people follow. A bunch of different social channels and websites ran the story that Lando was exclusively in the post-launch DLC and that Jabba the Hutt was only available in the Season Pass exclusive mission. As I've mentioned in previous videos, if you watched the trailers for Star Wars Outlaws, so the absolute bare minimum, or watched myself or other creators that cover the game, you will know that Jabba the Hutt was confirmed for over a year before release to be a big part of the main game. We also knew that Lando was going to be in the main game as well, but again, they just completely omitted that detail. These so-called journalists just decided to do no basic research. These two news stories actively harmed the game in the run-up to launch. People really thought that Lando and Jabba were locked behind DLC. Both of those things were simply not true. This doesn't just happen to Star Wars Outlaws though, even though I would say it's been hurt the most by this terrible journalism. They've done this with Battlefront 2 quite a lot as well. For example, in 2019, PC Gamer claimed that heroes were directly purchasable with real money in Battlefront 2. You could never, ever do that. This is a straight up lie. Why did they lie? I don't know. These writers do absolutely zero research, I'm pretty sure, when it comes to Star Wars games, because we all know that just was not a thing at launch, and never has been. During the early access period, you could purchase heroes with in-game credits, but not real cash, like this article suggested. A more recent Battlefront 2 example is during its resurgence this year. Many websites only reported the Steam charts number, claiming that because it's just a few thousand people logging in concurrently, no one should really pay attention to Battlefront 2. Except most of these websites completely ignored the fact that myself and Battlefront Updates received EA's data directly from trusted sources close to EA, and across all platforms on several days, it had reached over 300,000 concurrently active players. This makes it one of the most played games across PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Data that comes from publishers themselves later proved that, yes, Battlefront 2 was one of the most played games during various months this year. A lot of Battlefront players will know that myself and Battlefront Updates are trustworthy. We have been for around a decade now. For some reason, these journalists just decided not to include our information in their articles or didn't do any research to even find it. Personally, I think that the information would actually bolster their news story. It would make it more interesting than just reporting on low-hanging fruit, that is, the Steam charts, which are publicly available and visible by anybody. We actually had an inside source. That's a little bit more exciting and interesting to me, and I think it was also to pretty much everyone else in the Battlefront community. The PC playbase for Battlefront has always been the smallest portion of the community, and it should be important to include console players as well, which is what we had numbers for. These journalists are just negligent. Last year, Game Reactor wrote Battlefront 2 killed first-person Star Wars because DICE didn't understand Star Wars, apparently, and that Greedo was in the game, and droids could roll, and that's a big issue. Plus, stormtroopers didn't have helmets because EA wanted to sell skins with different faces. What on earth? As we know, stormtroopers didn't have helmets in Battlefront 2015, so they made a mistake there. And Greedo was not in Battlefront 2, but rather 2015 as well. They just can't even get the game right at this point, which is very, very basic stuff. Oh, and you couldn't purchase a single helmeted stormtrooper skin with money whatsoever. You earned everything through playing the game. Seriously. This is worse than AI slop. I don't think I've heard any Battlefront player complain about rolling, especially as droids, in the game. It's called gameplay. It's called making a good game, gameplay first, and not what's the most realistic thing. On top of that, it is an absolute insult to say that DICE didn't understand Star Wars when we know, as a Battlefront community, that many of those developers were some of the biggest Star Wars fans around, and they knew Star Wars better than most people. The BBC misreported that EA removed certain items from Battlefront 2 loot boxes in early 2018. As we all know, Battlefront 2's loot boxes were actually removed on launch day in late 2017, not 2018, and it wasn't just certain items. They became daily login rewards from April 2018. But from release day in 2017 to April 2018, there was no loot boxes or anything like that. Similar websites also rushed to report Battlefront 3 had been added to Steam when it was an easily provable hoax. And websites such as comicbook.com, which is a website I absolutely detest, reported a provably fake Battlefront 3 screenshot in 2021. Yes, 4 years ago they reported this and we debunked it within a couple of hours. No retraction, no correction, no updates, just still up there as Battlefront 3 leaked screenshot? Ridiculous. CNET claimed Finn, Rey and Kylo came to Battlefront 2 during 2019's Rise of Skywalker update, 2 years after they came to the game, and that a hero token is required to play as them? Again, false. Another thing that comes to mind is a bunch of websites got some details wrong about Palpatine's brief removal from the game. I saw a bunch of outlets claim that LEGO Star Wars Battles is a brand new game releasing, when actually it released a year before they started reporting on it. How were you a year late? Some websites even tried pitting Battlefront and Jedi game fans against each other for some reason. They are the same people, because a lot of people that play the Jedi games also play Battlefront and vice versa. What? Another thing that comes to mind is that in 2021, dozens of game websites all reported Lucasfilm Games has been so-called resurrected by Disney, and said it's like LucasArts has returned. However, Lucasfilm Games has always existed basically and never actually went away. It was just given more of a prominent public-facing identity. They had been working alongside EA for around a decade at that point. It was just straight up misinformation and misunderstanding of what was going on, but they still published those articles without any sort of correction and update, whatever. Ugh. It's just so terrible. Another example of the games media refusing to take accountability is when I've pushed back against them, and they've seemingly blocked me for speaking the truth. I've had two experiences specifically with Eurogamer, a website that I've read for nearly 2 decades. So I comment on their articles because, well, I read their articles. I'm a reader of their work. Now, we all know Star Wars Outlaws on Switch 2 was given a release date in April at Star Wars Celebration. Ubisoft announced this during the Star Wars Celebration livestream. It was also on their website, social accounts, and more. I made videos covering this. Even websites covered this news. However, Eurogamer and a few others didn't do any research, and they put out an article 3 months after we already knew the release date, claiming that the release date had just been announced. When I commented on the article saying that this isn't news, it was previously announced by Ubisoft, they refused to allow my comment publicly under the article and seemingly blocked my account from being able to comment on their website ever again. I take issue with the games media who don't care about Star Wars games. Why are you even reporting on it in the first place? Why are you reporting on something many months late? Just don't do it. Why are you disrespecting Star Wars Outlaws in particular? The biggest question is, why does the media attack Star Wars games harder than many others? They seemingly struggle at their jobs when it comes to our games. Well, here are my thoughts. Star Wars as a whole has always been looked under a magnifying glass far more than most other franchises and pieces of media. More so, the games. I mean, Battlefront 2's monetization made global news, and yet a ton of other games before and after its release had far more predatory microtransactions, and no one really cared about them. Battlefront 2 was made the fall guy because Star Wars. There is way more scrutiny put on this franchise because it's so popular and matters to so many people. It also has set and raised bars in many forms of media. This isn't a new thing either, it's been happening for many decades. The reason why it's more visible now is because how times have changed. The internet is far bigger and more accessible. Hating on Star Wars has been extremely profitable for the past decade or so since it returned to the big screen with The Force Awakens. During the prequel era, the media were very quick to attack and destroy parts of Star Wars if they could, including those that worked on it. We all know those stories well. However, it's far more profitable these days, and way more accessible for people to do so. Anyone can start a YouTube channel and start spreading misinformation or hatred. There is a much bigger audience to address and take the clicks. I don't think this will ever change for Star Wars, to be honest. It will always be scrutinised far more than most, and the games that we love and just want to be excited for will be gone after for hate clicks. It's one of the reasons why George Lucas himself sold it. What we can do is not click on those articles or videos, but also just completely block out using those harmful websites for all sorts of news, because they may be doing it for other games and franchises that you love as well. I really hope you found this video insightful, showing just how bad journalism is when it comes to Star Wars games. This is going to be an ongoing battle forever, I think, but we have to do something, and that's sticking up for the games that we are excited for and love. I would love to hear your thoughts on anything I've talked about in this video, so please do let me know down in the comment section below, and I really appreciate you making it this long into the video. If you enjoyed this video, please do drop a like to help support the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already to keep up to date with all the Star Wars gaming news updates. And if you missed any of my previous videos, click on the playlist on the screen right now, and I shall see you in my next video. Goodbye.